She looks down, and Hugh has taken Luke in his arms and almost pulls a Candyman. Welcome back, readers. It is I, Robin, your uncle. As promised, I'm bringing you episodes 6 through 10 of Mike Flanagan's rendition of The Haunting of Hill House. Click above if you want to see the first half of that. I think that it was very funny. So let's just jump right into it. Today, the look that I'm doing is going to lean into these nightmare bags. I'm going to kind of do like a Nell on the poster kind of thing. Episode 6, Two Storms. Like Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, it is shot in very few cuts. And I don't have a cup of stars, but I do have a cup of flowers. Now, Shirley is doing final touches on Nell's body for the viewing. Theo is getting drunk. Luke and Steve arrive. They all came together on the plane, but Hugh is not there yet. They decide to go see the body, and Steve starts to cry. So everyone moves into the other room, and Steve looks back and sees Liv. I think it's Liv. It's hard to tell because she's far away, but I'm pretty sure it's his mom. Steve tells himself to get it together. So Hugh arrives, and when he sees the kids, he sees them all as kids. He says to himself, "Neither can I. Look at them. They're all so grown up." He's going to be talking to himself to the side for a little while, and we're not going to find out for a little bit what that's about, but we will come back to it. He goes to see Nell in the coffin, and it's Nell's body when she was a child, and it's just heartbreaking. I really like Henry Thomas's performance. He is young Hugh, but I find the older Hugh, Timothy Hutton's portrayal of Hugh, to be a lot more emotionally resonant. I find him to have a greater range of emotions. Then the chandelier at Hill House comes crashing to the ground. Everyone comes down and kids are all afraid. Then suddenly the power goes out. Nell sees the bent neck lady, and Liv tells her that she sees things too, but the things that they see aren't there to hurt her. Categorically untrue. Hugh brings in a box of flashlights and other paraphernalia. As they're looking through the flashlights that Hugh brings, Nellie vanishes. Hugh and Liv go out to find her, and Steve promises Luke that he won't let anything bad happen to her. Now, Hugh tells the kids the story of Nell writing letters to Santa and how she always asked for the things that other people wanted. She never asked for her own things. And how she would write letters to Hugh for years, every month, just telling him everything that the kids were up to. And Steve takes issue with this, and he says, okay, well, if she wrote you every month, how is it that you didn't see that she was about to have a psychotic break? And mentions that she came to his book signing. Shirley, when he mentions his book, says that he doesn't really have the moral high ground here because he sold out their childhood trauma. Theo tells Shirley that she ended up taking Steve's money. And Shirley is pissed off and tells her that she's moving out. You have to move out of my guest house. Kevin, in an attempt to calm things, or to, I guess, finally come clean, tells Shirley that he also accepted the money on her behalf, and how that is how they paid for all of the pro bono services they did, all the charity work that they did, and, you know, how it did a lot of good. And she gets pissed off and tells everyone, okay, that's it. You're all leaving. She gets to Nell's casket and sees that there are buttons on her eyes. I don't understand the significance of the buttons on the eyes. Like, I know it's a thing, but I don't know why it's here. Like, it's like a Celtic ritual, no? It's about you keep the buttons on the eyes until the soul is ready to leave the body. I don't know the significance of having it here. And then the lights go out in Georgia.
The lights went out in Georgia.
Hugh looks at Nellie's body and then looks up and sees her spirit with the bent neck. I'm trying not to show her with the bent neck. I don't want to trigger anybody, and I honestly don't know like what the restrictions are on YouTube to show stuff like that. So when you can see her and it's not widely evident that she has a broken neck, I'm gonna try to give some visual cues, but in general, I'm not gonna show her. It's not worth it. If you want to see her with a bent neck, Google it or go watch the series. It's not really my steez. Where are my brushes?
Oh, where is my hairbrush?
Then Hugh and Olivia are looking for Nell in the house, and Hugh's flashlight stops working even though he just put batteries in it. So he goes off to get more batteries, and Liv sees a couple of ghosts. When Hugh comes back, her flashlight is on the ground and she's nowhere to be seen. So I think that Liv is the most susceptible to the house's influence, like Eleanor in the book. Hugh sees some hallucinations and then finally finds Liv sitting on the ground down the hall. She says, "Honey, I'm having the strangest dream." This is going to come back. They go back to where the kids are, and they're all screaming, saying that they saw and heard some kind of beast like a dog. In the book, I may have mentioned this in the last episode, I can't remember, but in the book, the first night there is the sound of dogs that is meant to draw Dr. Montague. That is his name, Dr. Montague. And Luke away from Theo and Eleanor. And so they chase them outside, and they later come to the conclusion that the house was trying to separate them. Suddenly, Nell appears exactly where she disappeared. Now, Luke asks Hugh if he thinks that Nell was the bent neck lady this whole time, and Hugh says yeah. Luke also says that he doesn't think that Nell did it to herself. So Steve continues to try to ask why Hugh won't give them any specifics about Olivia's death as well as about Nell's death, because presumably Mrs. Dudley called him first. And Hugh keeps saying that he was trying to protect the kids, which I totally get. But I mean, they're adults now, right? They keep bickering until Steve lets slip that the wrong parent died. Nell's casket falls on the ground. My take on this is that it was Nell that threw her casket on the ground to try to get them to stop fighting. This is not the only time that something like this is going to happen. Spoiler. I do not like what this looks like at all. I don't like the way that this is blending. I'm going to try to blend this out. All right, so Shirley goes to Nell's body and says that she needs to fix the makeup, so she goes off to find her makeup kit, and she ends up opening the door to the storage and sees Theo grabbing at her husband and reacts pretty reasonably. As she's walking away, she sees the image of a man raising a glass to her. Then Luke tells Nell not to scare him like that again. I don't know if I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. I do not like the actor who plays Luke. He's very cute, but he is a bad actor. I don't find his performance to be very believable. It feels like he's kind of reading off of a teleprompter. Easy for me to say, right? Because all the other kids do such an amazing job, his performance really falls flat for me. Nell says that she was there the whole time, but no one could see her. And it kind of fades into Nell now standing in the room with her family as a spirit, and no one can see her. The house can alter your perception, which is explained a lot more explicitly in the book. So my understanding is that the house isolated Nell from the rest of the family for, the purposes of scaring everybody, because when you are more scared, you're then less logical and more susceptible to fear, which comes up again later in the series. It was very much not clear to me when I was watching the show. Episode 7, Eulogy. Then Hugh is at the police station, and a cop is trying to ask him about what happened the night before. So this is right after the last night. They tell him that he should cooperate because even though he's not being detained, it looks better for him, and that they want to make sure that he's free from suspicion, which if we remember Gone Girl, that actually doesn't track. Ask if you're being detained, lawyer up, know your rights. I'm going for like a I'm super tired kind of look. Police officer mentions how it looks bad for Hugh, especially because of the other body. Now this is the first we're hearing of this. It's going to come back. Now, Hugh is talking to himself about which tie he should wear to the funeral. And then he goes to Shirley's house. And Shirley's kids ask him why they have never met, and he does not answer. Kevin comes in after having slept at the hotel, and Shirley tells him that he needs to go out and get lilies for the ceremony. Hugh tells Shirley that she should go easy on him because, you know, everybody messes up, and he knows that he slept at the hotel because he saw him there. And Shirley kicks him out. She's like, the service is at 10:30. We're not open yet. Oh, yeah. This is supposed to look like this. I'm doing this on purpose. Then, Hugh and Mr. Dudley are surveying the damage from the storm the night before, and it turns out that there is significant water damage. Hugh says, I can fix it.
Why do I fix everything I touch?
They follow the water damage all the way into the basement, and they see that there is black mold down there. They figure that the black mold is coming from the red room because it's the only room that they haven't been able to get into. Hugh goes to Theo's. As you remember, she's still in the guest house, and she apologizes to him for not meeting him halfway because he messed up all those years ago with their mom. She says that she recently messed up, and it made her realize how easy it is to screw up, to make a big mistake that you can't take back. We see that this whole time when he's been talking to himself, he's actually been talking to Liv. Then Hugh and Liv are talking about the damage done in the house, and she says that she can't find any blueprints that matches because all the floor plans don't match. She said she's gonna make a master blueprint, and Hugh rents a bunch of fans from a mold specialist because he can't afford to get specialists to come in, and he says that Steve's going to be helping him, and Steve is happy to help. Now it's time for the funeral. I don't understand this part. Luke and Steve and Kevin are all wearing boutonnieres. Do people wear boutonnieres to funerals? I thought when I watched this, when I saw that Luke had the boutonniere, I thought it was because he missed Nell's wedding. This is, whoa, I look so pale. Okay. It's good though. It's good. It's what I want. I want to look pale. That's the point. I'm trying to look like Nell, if you recall. So I thought it was because he missed her wedding, and so he dresses up with the boutonniere to kind of try to make up for it. But then I see that they're all wearing boutonnieres, so I don't know. It's weird. Is this weird?
Is this weird? Is this too weird?
Theo arrives, and then so does Trish. And Theo is surprised to see her, and Trish says that she saw in the paper the obituary, and she was surprised that Theo didn't tell her about it. And Theo originally is annoyed, but she gets over it. Then, Hugh and Steve are getting ready to spray the mold compound, and they hear scratching behind the wall. Hugh mentions that he's going to buy some rat poison. Liv comes down and gives Hugh the blueprints. Now, they have the funeral, and everyone says goodbye to Nell in their own way. Then, Dudley comes down to look at the blueprints, and he gets confused and asks Hugh what it is, and Hugh doesn't really know what to say. He says he has to ask Liv about it. And Dudley tells him a story about how he was born a unicorn on the grounds of the house, and how his family bought the house on the edge of the property from the hills, and how his mother used to work long shifts and night shifts, and she would come back and seem really scattered. Like, she would go into the woods with no shoes on and be giggling like a schoolgirl. And then he met Mrs. Dudley, or Claire. He met her, and then they got married. And she got pregnant, and they insisted that she continue working while pregnant. And she did, because, you know, they probably needed the money. Or there was some kind of stipulation that, like, they would lose the house or something like that. I mean, they're rich, so I assume they did something untoward. But she continued working, and then when it was time to have the baby was stillborn. She would get debilitating nightmares that would have her shaking and crying in the corner. I can relate. One night she was working and she heard a baby crying, and she ran through the woods and cut her face up really bad, getting to her husband to tell him what she had heard. And he went back with her, and he heard it too, and he was convinced that it was the first cry that their baby never got to have. They decided that we will clear off when we come back the next morning, but at night we're not going to be here. And it worked. You know, all of the symptoms that she was feeling went away. They decided that that's what they were going to do. From that point on, they would bring them their dinner at night and then clear off in the morning. In the book, they live in the town. They don't live across the property. So they're like really far away if anything happens in the night, in the dark. So after this story, Dudley tells Hugh that since Olivia is seeming scattered, that she should maybe take some time away. Later on, Hugh is looking to repair one of the fans because it's not working, and he tells Steve to unplug it. And while he's looking at the wall, he sticks his hand in the fan, and it slices his hand up because apparently Steve did not unplug it, even though we saw him do it. And then he's angry and he sends Steve away. Having had enough, he goes up to the red room with a crowbar and a hammer and tries to forcibly pry the door open, and it just does not budge. How do I look? I look crazy. That's good. That's what I want. At the grave, Luke sees Nell under the casket, and it tells him, "Don't." And then Olivia comes and tries to grab him, trying to bring him into the grave with her. Then Hugh wakes up with Liv sitting on his chest with a screwdriver to his throat, and he wakes her up going, "What the hell?" And he brings her downstairs and shows her the blueprints. And the blueprints are actually full of this shape over and over. And she's like, "I didn't draw this." And he goes, "Yeah, you did. And I didn't know what this shape was, so I looked at your stuff and I realized it was the footprint to the Forever House." And she agrees that she's been really scattered lately and that it might be time for her to take some time away. Now, Hugh tells Luke that he sees Liv every day because it's a coping mechanism that widowers and widows use when they lose a partner. They imagine them in their mind and, you know, interact with them. So that's what he's been doing this whole time, indicating that this is not necessarily Liv's actual ghost, but more a projection of his like memories of her. He says that seeing things is normal, but Luke cuts him off and says, "Big boys know the difference between what's real and what's imaginary." From episode 4, you get it. Hugh tells Luke that he's proud of him, and Luke goes outside for a smoke. Then Hugh is spraying the walls, and he hears that sound again, so he decides that he's going to kill the rats. He finally has the strychnine, and he pulls out a couple of bricks and does not see a rat. He sees a dead body. Remember from before? And he calls the cops, and the cops are exhuming the body. It has a cane, just like the tall ghost with the bowler hat. And we find out that this is William Hill. He went missing in 1948. And it looks like he bricked himself in there. Now, Theo comes into the funeral home and says that her car is gone. And Hugh realizes that he saw Luke steal something out of her bag. And he says that Luke probably took it. And also, Shirley's wallet is missing. Steve and Shirley run off, and then Hugh and Theo see mold coming from Shirley's office. They go in, and they see the Forever House has been destroyed, and then out comes Liv. The real Liv. Then, Hugh is still at the police station. The officer keeps trying to find out what happened in the 3 hours after Hugh found Liv's body, but he's not saying. Episode 8, Witness Marks. 1 month ago, Lee and Steve are talking fertility options at a clinic, and Steve sees his mom on the other side of the transparent door. Now, Shirley calls the credit card company and has them tell her when the card is being used so that they can find out where Luke is. And Steve offers to go driving around to look for him. Hugh meets him at the car and says he just wants to help, mirroring Steve wanting to help Hugh when he was younger. Then, Steve goes up the stairs in the house and passes a couple of workmen, one of whom is a 1920s looking guy repairing the clock with a little tweedly mustache. He looks into the twins' bedroom and sees that Olivia is there talking to no one. She says, "Of course you're safe with me," and then snaps out of it when Steve calls her. She asks where the twins are, and he says that they're downstairs, and she seems relieved. Kevin is bringing Shirley's kids out for trick-or-treating, and she turns off the light. So someone keeps ringing the doorbell even though the lights are off. And Shirley goes outside to give them, a piece of her mind. But there's nobody there. So Shirley goes off to fix the house, and she sees all this black mold on the pieces of the Forever house. I lost my eyelash. Fuck. Steve and Hugh start arguing again about what happened to Liv. Steve says he got his hands on the police report and how he saw that her ankle had been twisted, that her head had split open like a melon, and that the back of her head had bruising, like someone had pushed her against a wall. He blames Hugh for her death because she was a danger to herself and he should have protected her better. He should have taken her with them when he took the kids. Then, Steve finds a hope chest and brings it to Mrs. Dudley and says he wants to fix it up for his mom. She says, "Where did you find it?" And he goes, "The game room." And she goes, "Where?" It turns out that it was Poppy's hope chest. Poppy was what Mrs. Dudley calls insane, which back in the, I want to say 20s, 30s, 40s, insane was only something that they slapped on people who behaved in a way that they couldn't predict. Just like if you've heard the term hysteria or hysterical. Hysteria is a disease that was in the DSM-5 until the 1980s. And the thought was that a person with a uterus, their uterus was roaming about their body. So in order to coax it back to the place where it's supposed to be, because it made the uterus haver behave in weird and unpredictable ways, in order to coax the uterus to come back down, they would do pelvic massage. Yes, it's exactly what you think it is. And Freud thought that people with uteruses really wanted to have a penis. So the way to cure or to treat hysteria was for a person with a uterus to get married to someone with a penis. This was in the DSM-5 until 1980. 1980. And they want to regulate our bodies? I don't think so. So Steve paints the chest and it's covered in mold. Just covered in paint. It's fine. The door keeps knocking and it starts to really distress Shirley. So she runs outside and asks what the fuck they want. But it's Theo coming to apologize again. She brings Theo in and Theo tries to explain what happened, but Shirley's not having it. They get into a physical fight and Shirley ends up punching her in the boob. There's not much time to unpack that because the banging happens again. This time the banging is mirroring the banging in episode 2 when Theo came into Shirley's room and the banging started happening. Yeah, this part confuses me because the house has nothing to do with Hill House. And the whole thing about Hill House is that it's the house itself that has the power. And so like the further that you move away from it, at least this is from the book, the further that you move away from it, the less power it has. And yet it seems that the tricks are still following them. So I'm confused as to how that works within the canon. Steve and Hugh get a call from Shirley that there was a hit on the credit card in Amherst. and they note that Amherst is on the way to Hill House. I don't use lip liner a lot, but I really should. So Steve lets slip that he never wants to have kids and tells Hugh that he got a vasectomy, but he never told Lee about it, which is why they had their fight. That's a really good reason to have a fight. If you are having sex with someone under certain pretenses and it turns out to not be true, that is non-fully consensual sex. She was doing it with you because she thought that she would be getting pregnant and you lied to her. Then Steve gives the vanity to Olivia, and almost the moment that she sits down at it, she punches the mirror, scaring Steve. Now, they get to the gas station and the attendant says that Luke bought 4 canisters full of gasoline, and they realize that he is on his way to destroy the house. He was like, okay, no, I'm driving now. So as he starts to drive, he lays some truth bombs on Steve. He's been holding back the truth for 20 years to protect them. Steve did see a ghost. He wrote about it in the book. And so he is in danger, as are the rest of the kids. And Steve's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't see a ghost. And Hugh's response is, yeah, you did. The person repairing the clock, I never had anyone repairing that clock. We looked inside the antique clock and they have what's called witness marks. See the name of the episode? Because there are very rarely any kind of records of repairs of those kinds of clocks that they keep. And you have to learn how to read the witness marks to see who touched it and when. And it hadn't been touched since the 60s. He never hired anyone to repair it. And even if he had, they would have had to send it out because there's only a couple of people in the world who can do it. So Steve saw a ghost and he wrote about it in his book. He also says that he never built a tree house. So where was Luke that whole time? The family is not sick. What happened is real. The house killed Liv. The house killed Nell. He told Shirley and Theo to stay put, so he's hoping that they will, but they don't. They are driving to Hill House, and on the way, they start bickering again. But this time, the apparition of Nell's ghost pops her head in a jump scare of Flanagan fashion, and they freak out and stop on the side of the road where Theo falls out and starts to tell Shirley exactly what she was experiencing. My cat's got the zoomies. I'm going to be putting these. What you will need is your gems, your gem picker. You can get this online. Or you can use, if you feel confident with your ability to use it with your fingers, you can use tweezers. My hands don't really work with tweezers, so these are better for me. You can also just put it on your finger, or you can use like a silly putty type thing, so you can kind of like pick it up with the silly putty and then try to place it on your face. You can use spirit gum if you have it, but a lot of people don't, so I just use the Duo Lash Glue. It'll work in a pinch. The gems are small, so they should stick on the face. So Theo gets out of the car and says out loud that Shirley knows what happens when she touches things, right? The family should know, just based on what we've seen. When she touched Nell's body, she suddenly started feeling nothing. She had this deep, empty nothingness spreading out, and so that's why she called Trish, and Trish came over and they did what they do, and it didn't stop the nothing. So she started drinking and she just felt nothing, and she drank all day and felt nothing, and then finally when the lights went out, she saw nothing and she felt nothing, and she saw a light and she reached for it so that she could try to feel something, and then the lights came back on and it turned out that it was Kevin. And suddenly Shirley saw her and she had the feelings of shame and guilt, and so it worked. So she was able to feel something other than the spreading, awful nothing. The nothingness that she is worried is what happens to you when you die. Cheery, I know. This is an excellent monologue by Kate Siegel. I highly recommend you give it a watch. And that is enough to patch the rift, at least a little bit, between the two, and they go off driving again. Luke arrives at the house, and he pours all of his gasoline all over the ground. And he grabs his trusty lighter and lights it on fire. And nothing happens. He then sees his mother at the top of the stairs and Poppy grabs him from behind. Episode 9, Screaming Mimis. This episode is a very Liv heavy episode. This whole episode is going to take place then, so I'm not going to do the whole then and now thing because, you know, Liv's dead. So Liv is lying on the couch with the two babies, the two youngest, and she says that she wishes that they could stay this way forever. But before she knows it, she looks down and Hugh has taken Luke in his arms and almost pulls a Candyman and says, "You coming?" And Liv goes, "Yeah." The day after the storm, Liv comes out in her bare ass feet talking to Mrs. Dudley about what happened. And she mentions a time when she was a child when she lost her dad and it rained rocks. And that's actually the only reason why I'm bringing this up. It doesn't really come back in the grand scheme of things, but this part actually is in the book. Theodora experiences a rock storm. Not that kind of rock storm. And that's one of the reasons why she was picked to be part of the group to investigate Hill House. So that's fun. Liv's got a headache, so she goes into the kitchen to get herself some water to take with her medicine. And Luke and Shirley are arguing. And Shirley is trying to convince Luke that his friend Abigail is not real. And she says, "Tell Mom where Abigail lives." And he goes, "In the woods." Olivia makes very little response to this and just says, "Have fun," and then leaves. Olivia goes up to her reading room, but when she opens the door, she sees Nell lying on the metal slab at the funeral home. And then she sees Luke lying on the ground, foaming at the mouth, presumably having overdosed. I believe this is the same vision that Nell has when he's on the ceiling in episode 5. She tells Hugh that she knew who it was. She knew it was them. And he says, "Wow, that sounds like a really bad dream." And she seems a little perturbed by this. Like, "No, man, this wasn't a dream. This was a vision." Olivia doesn't know that it's going to happen as a result, at least in part, of her dying. That night, Olivia meets Poppy. Poppy says that she loves what Olivia's done with the reading room. It used to be a dressing room for her and then a nursery. And Poppy asks her why she looks so tired. She admits that she had a dream where her Nell went missing and it was so scary. Now, this was not a dream, if you recall. This actually happened. But it seems like Olivia is starting to lose touch with reality. And then Poppy tells a story about her children. First, her daughter, who has a terrible convulsing problem, so probably epilepsy, and how she would watch her child suffer until one day her child died. And then her other child, whose legs suddenly stopped working, so presumably that's the ghost in the wheelchair that Liv would have seen in episode 6, I think. For her, it would have been the day before. His legs stopped working, and then he started losing his mental faculties until all he could do was cry and scream and bang on the walls. And then how eventually he died. But that was just a dream. It was what she calls a screaming Mimi. A screaming Mimi is a dream so real and so bad that if you are a good parent, then you would have to wake them. It would be your job to wake them. Suddenly, Olivia is in the twins' room, and Poppy asks Olivia what she would do if the twins were having a bad dream, and she said that she would wake them. A dream about disease and sadness and loss. If they were stuck in that dream, you'd wake them. And then she says that she has a secret for waking them and then whispers something in her ear. And this is where we cut to Liv holding the screwdriver to Hugh's throat. We don't know why she's doing it. We just kind of see her snapping to when he says her name. And if you recall, this is when she agreed that it would be time to go see her sister. Olivia goes into the twins' room, She's tucking them in, and Nell says, "What happens if I have a bad dream? What if you send us out there into the dark and I feel so sad that I have to die?" And Luke says, "What if I'm so sad and so scared that I put poison in me and I just keep poisoning myself until one day my body breaks down?" And again, it feels like he's reading this off of a teleprompter. It's just really, it kind of undercuts the emotion of the scene. I wonder how many takes this took. Nell asks Olivia if they're safe with her, and as we remember from last episode, her answer is, "Yes, of course you're safe, sweetheart." And then Steve shakes her out of it. What's the word? Snaps her out of it. Mrs. Dudley asks Olivia if she's okay, and she says that she feels a lot of fear about her kids. And Mrs. Dudley says, "Don't let anyone tell you that your being worried is too much. Don't let them tell you to relax." This is bad advice. At a certain point, if you are a parent, you need to let them go. I mean, obviously not when they're children, but worrying about things that may or may not happen in the future is it's going to debilitate you, and you're never going to be able to send them out there. You're never going to be able to, your fears are going to become their trauma, which we are going to see very shortly. Steve brings Olivia to see the vanity, and she is really grateful that he's thinking of her. And then she sees the present day twins in it, both dead, and that is why she punches the mirror. Hugh asks Olivia why she did it, and she says she doesn't know. I'm wondering if she says that she doesn't know because when she told Hugh about her vision, he wrote it off as being just a dream, and she didn't really trust him to hear her this time, so she just said she didn't know. She said that she used to have all these different kinds of feelings, like anticipation and stress and excitement and concern and motivation and creativity, but all of those colors are now gone, and the only thing left is fear. They both agree that she needs to leave as soon as possible. So the next day she's leaving, and she's saying goodbye to the kids, and Luke asks if Abigail can stay in their room for a sleepover, and Liv says yes. But rather than leaving, we see that she goes to the motel, waits until dark, and then goes back to the house. Shirley goes down to the kitchen to make a snack, and she sees Liv there. Olivia goes up to the twins' room and sees that Abigail is there with them. This is the first time that we see that Abigail is actually a real person, and she invites Abigail to have a tea party with them. They go to the red room, and Nell says that they need a key, but Olivia says the secret is we are the key. So Shirley goes to Hugh and asks why Mom is here if she said goodbye to everybody, and Hugh is confused because he thought that Olivia had gone to see her sister Janet.
Damn it, Janet.
He goes to the kitchen, and he sees the open container of rat poison. He then rushes to the twins' room and sees that they're not there. In the red room, Olivia pours everyone some tea, including herself, and she makes sure that Nellie has a cup of stars. Abigail takes a sip of her tea. Abigail starts to cough and foam at the mouth, and Olivia says, "Don't worry, she's waking up and making us all safe forever." So now would be a good time to explain that for Olivia, waking up means dying. She is convinced that she is asleep, and either that or it's just what she calls waking up. She seems to either really misunderstand what she's doing, or she is so deluded into thinking that killing her kids is better than letting them go out there and live. It's really hard to tell. It's also a good time to mention that it's not explicitly stated, but it's pretty clear that Poppy killed her kids. So that was why she had the trick on how to wake her kids up. So I take it to mean that a screaming Mimi is just life, not this kind of screaming Mimi. So Hugh comes in time to save Luke and Nell. He throws all of the tea on the ground, and Liv comes and grabs at him, and he pushes her away, which is how she falls against the wall and how she hurts her ankle. She loses consciousness. And this is when Luke sees Abigail in the window. He is seeing her ghost. Liv sees that all of the kids are out of their beds. Hugh's running down the hallway and he is surrounded by ghosts. I only recognize Poppy and William. So Olivia is looking for her kids, but they're all gone. As you may know, most of them are in the car. He gets to Steve's door and tries to turn the knob, but the door is locked. If you remember in episode 1, we saw that the doorknob was turning. It's Olivia on the other side. Poppy comes and starts whispering in Olivia's ear, saying that he's taking the kids away from her. And Hazel says to Olivia, she lies. And so Olivia goes into Hazel's room, and Hazel repeats, she lies, that one. Oh, how right you are, Hazel. And then Olivia asks Hazel how she can wake up. Hugh then, with Steve in his arms, runs down the hallway and Liv tries to chase after them, as we may remember again from episode 1. And Hugh drives away, leaving Olivia in the house. And she heads back to the red room and she sees Abigail there. And it seems like she has a moment of clarity where she realizes what she's done. But then when she sees Abigail's ghost, she then falls back into her delusion that she made the right choice. She asks Abigail if she's awake now. Desperate to wake up, she runs to the edge of the spiral staircase. And Poppy is telling her that she can wake herself up, and Liv jumps off and dies. And then right at the end of the episode, we see everyone coming into the house for the first time. And Hugh and the kids are going up the stairs. And Liv is like, you go on without me. And Hugh's response is,
how could we?
ugh, heartbreaking. Gut punch. Thank you, Flanagan. Fun fact, screaming Mimi's are often linked to hysteria. So when I said that she was probably diagnosed with hysteria, it was 100% accurate. I knew it. Episode 10. Silence lay steadily. Then we see Shirley trying to open the red room with the key that they gave her, but we see on the other side of the door is actually Theo. So what we thought were two separate scenes were the scenes happening at the same time. Theo is inside, she sees the doorknob moving and the slam on the door, and Shirley is on the outside and they see Theo walking around inside the room. Now, Steve is trying to write a sequel to the Hill House book. He is there with Lee, who is pregnant now, but it looks like he has writer's block. And so it goes back to when they arrived at the house. Steve and Hugh came in. Steve sees William, and Hugh tells him just to look at him so that he doesn't look at William's ghost. I think that the reason for this is if you are scared enough, then you kind of lose your wits, and then you end up doing things to yourself, which is in the book. Steve says to himself, I am home, I thought, and stopped to wonder at the thought. I am home, now to climb. That's exactly in the book. That's what Eleanor thinks when she finally goes into the library. Again, I thought that she was going to jump off the top, but Luke comes and helps her back down, and then they all yell at her and tell her she has to leave. It's disappointing. Hugh and Steve get to the red room, and Hugh can see the door is closed, but for Steve, it's open, and he can see Luke inside, so he runs in and the door slams shut behind him. Back in LA, Lee is asking Steve what happened next, and he says that he doesn't remember. He doesn't remember what happened after he went in the red room. He doesn't remember coming back to LA. He doesn't remember Lee getting pregnant. And she says, well, of course not. You haven't written about it yet. And so she starts to taunt him until she starts to look dead, and she says if she pops like a blister, will he go crazy? Nell shows up. She touches his forehead and he wakes up. Shirley and Theo are in the red room too, and that there's a needle in Luke's arm, so he starts to give Luke CPR. We see a flashback from when Luke came into the house and when Poppy touched his head. He has a vision of himself and Joey in the hotel. He tries to remind himself that Joey left, and she says, no, I went to go get us this hotel room. She brings out a balloon of heroin and says that you can never really be clean, and he's like, no, I'm never going to put that stuff in my arm ever again. And she says, you already did. And he looks over and he sees that there is a syringe in his arm. That does track with the book's interpretation of people doing things to themselves because, the house is able to tap into their basest fears. But again, it doesn't really explain it here all that well. We see him on the ground next to the rat poison. So he didn't inject himself with drugs. He injected himself with strychnine. Steve comes in the door and Poppy touches his forehead and he goes into a trance. My thinking is that if you get touched by a ghost, it means that your fear will then take over, but it's not very clear as to how getting touched by the ghost makes you either pass out or, in Nell's case, fall off the staircase. It's really not clear, and reading the book isn't going to give you any kind of clarity on that either. And then it jumps to Theo and Shirley arriving, and Theo hears Hugh yelling upstairs, and so she runs upstairs to go see him, but he's actually passed out on the floor. And so Poppy touches her and she passes out, and then Shirley sees the vision of the man with the glass, and we finally see where that comes from. We never see her getting touched, we never see her getting dragged into the red room, but we have to assume that at some point this is what happens. Shirley is at a bar and a man sends her a drink, but she motions that she's married, and he's like, ooh, sorry. But she sends him an appetizer, and so he comes over and they end up talking shop. They're at a conference, it's about 6 years ago, and they're at a conference for funeral directors. Eventually, last call comes and goes, and he invites her up to his room. And she sees that he has a wedding ring, and she politely declines. He comes back, however, and explains to us, the audience, that she didn't say no. She saw that he had a ring, and that meant that he had as much to lose as she did. So she followed him up to his hotel room. Suddenly, she's at her own funeral, which is mirroring the mom's funeral. And she goes up and sees her body in the coffin, and her body starts to scratch away at her eyes until Nell touches her face and she wakes up in the red room. Steve is giving Luke CPR. I'm not a doctor, but is giving CPR to someone who has injected poison helpful? Okay, I've just looked it up, and actually that is what you're supposed to do if you ingest strychnine, so I learned something today.
Meanwhile,
Theo is in her own vision with Trish, and she is telling Trish about the time that she threw a rock through one of her mom's greenhouses that she had designed, and that she loved the lovely crash. And that's also from the book. Theodora did that once and talks about the lovely crash. Theo touches Trish without her gloves and realizes that she doesn't feel anything, and Trish is like, well, what were you feeling before? I was feeling fear and guilt. And Trish says that fear and guilt are sisters, and she tells the story of a man who had the sisters kiss his eyelids every day, and every day he went a little more mad until one day he bricked himself in to be able to escape the sisters, but they were in there with him. It was William. Again, it's not explicitly stated, but Mr. Dudley is William's illegitimate son. And when the mother was giggling like a schoolgirl, she probably was talking to William's ghost. And she said that he used to be so small, but when he woke up, he was tall. And that's why sometimes we see him very tall. I guess he always wanted to be tall. And dead hands start to grab at Theo, but Nell grabs her and she wakes up. Shirley and Steve are trying to revive Luke, but it doesn't work. So we see Luke wake up, as it were, in the red room, and Abigail is there, and young Nell is there, and Olivia is there. Olivia tells a story about how she fell in love with houses, and it's this like beautiful soliloquy, and it's also in the book, about how she saw a house with all these red roses and how she wanted to toast apples in her own hearth and tell fortunes and things like that. This was actually Eleanor's dream. They all put on big boy hats, and Olivia says that they're going to have a tea party. Before he sits down, Nell says, "Don't. Go." And Luke asks, "Am I dead?" And Olivia responds, "You're awake." And then Nell repeats, "Don't. Go." Older Nell grabs him and he gets revived and he starts gasping for air. So in each of the apparitions of the red room, we can see something red in the scene. So with Steve, it was his sweater. With Shirley, it was her shirt. With Luke, it was the balloon, and then later Olivia's dress. And with Theo, it was Trish's bra. So Luke, having just come to, points to the corner and says, "She saved me." It's the apparition of Nell. And at first it looks like she's talking absently to herself, but eventually she gets into the conversation with the kids, and it seems like everything's just been out of order for her. She explains that everyone's been in that room. It was Steve's game room, it was Shirley's family room, it was Theo's dance studio, it was Nell's toy room, and it was Luke's treehouse. It was also a reading room for Olivia. That's why anytime we would mention the treehouse or anytime they would mention the toy room, nobody knew what those rooms were because they only existed for that one person. Nell explains that the red room is like the stomach of the house where it's digesting everybody, and it made the room enticing for each of the people so that they would spend the most time in it. One could also assume that since Poppy said that the room used to be a nursery, that It is possible that the house was feeding on the kids, and that's why they became weaker and weaker and got sicker and sicker. It's clear that the mold is coming from here, but I don't think it's water damage. I think the mold is just like, it's like the manifestation of the evil of the house. And also, as we know, mold spores can affect your brain. I'm looking at you, JK. Nell explains that everything in her life has been out of order, that she doesn't experience life from start to finish. She experiences moments like they fall around her like drops of rain or confetti. And that explains a couple of things. Number one, when she went to the foot of Luke's bed and told him to go, that wasn't her telling him to leave the clinic. It was her telling him to go when he died, but she got the timing wrong. And I think that it's the same thing when he sees her at the grave and she says, don't. Again, she just kind of got her timing wrong. Nell reconciles with all of the kids, you know, her and Steve and her and Theo, and she says to Shirley that she answered the phone so many times before. It's not important that she didn't answer that last day. And she tells Luke that he can go on without her. She tells them that what happened couldn't be changed and that she doesn't blame any of them and that she's okay. So Hugh wakes up and Poppy tries to scare him with a creepy ass nursery rhyme that actually is in the book. Luke is reciting it to Theo in like this weird, playful, flirty way. It's very creepy. Liv scares Poppy away. So Liv says to Hugh, journeys end at lovers' meeting, which is from the book. Eleanor says it to herself a lot as like kind of a mantra. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I don't know if she was expecting to fall in love with somebody. There is this thing about her and Luke for a little bit, but then he just started getting annoyed with her, as was everybody else, which led to her alienation, etc., etc. Liz says that Hugh has changed so much, and he says that he saw her every day when he was gone, and she was like, that wasn't me. So again, that was just his approximation of her, whereas the real her is still kind of trying to get the kids to die. You know, she's been living in this house for 20 something years, and by living I mean deading. She's been in the house for 20 years, and clearly she doesn't have any allies there, really. And so maybe she's like still under this delusion. Hugh begs Liv to open the door because he knows that she can, and he says that he'll make a promise to her if she does. She opens the door, and Hugh helps Steve get Luke into the car, and everyone drives off to the hospital except for Steve and Hugh. Hugh asks Steve why he didn't tell what he saw. And so what we see is the 3 hours that were missing, and Steve sees it too. Hugh comes into the house and finds Olivia and starts screaming, and he turns to the Dudleys and asks what happened. Did they see it? And they said no. And that's where we get the old Flanagan gut punch. He asks them what they're doing there, and they said that their daughter crept out of her bed. And that is why Luke thought that Abigail lived in the woods, because she lived through the woods. She was the Dudley's daughter. So they go and they find her dead body and they freak out. But suddenly they hear her little voice, and Mrs. Dudley sees her ghost and asks what happened to her, who hurt her. And so she points to Liv's body. Hugh goes to look where she's pointing, and he sees Liv's ghost looking up at him. And Liv's ghost says, I'm having the strangest dream, which again, I would have thought that when she, woke up or when she died, she would get some perspective as to what happened, because when you die, you tend to get perspective, just in the canon of death, I guess. But she still seems like she is under the impression that she is not awake. She's devoid of reality, and it looks like she's not going to get that much better. Like, the only thing that I can glean from this is that it is the house that is continuing to put her under this delusion, because in the book, it is unequivocally the house that is the sinister part. There aren't any ghosts. There aren't any ghouls. It is the house that is the problem. It is the house that is evil. Hugh tells the Dudleys that he's going to burn the house to the ground, and they beg him not to because their daughter's ghost is there now. Like, they don't want him to take her from them. They say that he can't destroy the house because not everything in it belongs to him. They say, listen, we won't tell anyone what happened. Nobody even knew she was here. No one will mourn her. We'll bury her in the garden, and you keep us on. We'll take care of the house, and we will preserve your wife's memory. So he agrees. And Steve looks down and sees Hugh's body next to an open bottle of his heart medication. So he has overdosed, and this has actually been his ghost this whole time. Hugh tells Steve that he has never been more proud of anything than his kids. And he goes into the red room where Liv is waiting for him, and Nell too, and Liv stares daggers at us as the door closes. Steve, with dozens of ghosts following behind him, leaves Hill House without looking back. He goes home to LA and he visits Lee, and he begs her to take him back. He says that he was wrong, and they reconcile. Shirley goes to Kevin and starts telling him the story about what happened at the conference. We see Mr. Dudley and Mrs. Dudley. They're old now, and he's carrying her into the house, and Mrs. Dudley dies, and you see her ghost immediately holding the baby with Abigail's hand in hers. I cried at this part. I cried. Theo and Trish move in together, and Theo throws out her gloves. I don't know if this means that she doesn't have the thing anymore, or whether she's just willing to embrace, life fully. I hope Theo is moving out because she's, moving on with her life, and not because Shirley still kicked her out of the guest house. We see Luke get his 2-year cake. It looks like Lee is pregnant and Kevin is still in the picture, so that's a happy moment for them. It's theorized that because the cake is red, that Luke actually died in the red room, and that this is like a hallucination. But apparently Mike Flanagan came out and said, no, it's a happy ending. And that is the end of The Haunting of Hill House. Couple thoughts. I don't understand the representation of the house in this rendition. In the book, it's really clear. I mean, it's hard because books have really good ways of describing things that you can get a feel for it narratively without, having to just look at it. But, they talk about how all the angles are wrong. Each of the rooms has a very sinister feel to it. It's built so oddly that if you leave, you get the feeling like you were at sea for a certain period of time because everything is just so off kilter. In the series, it feels like there's just a bunch of malevolent spirits who are messing with the family versus the house itself. Also, the rules of the show confuse me. Like, can the ghosts touch you? Like, can they hurt you or can they not hurt you? Can they move you? Because who dragged all the kids up into the red room? And, Hugh helped Steve carry Luke so he can hold stuff. And when they touch you, do you do their bidding? Why do they need you to be scared? Like, you know what I mean? It's just the rules don't seem very clear, and reading the book doesn't really help. I'm sure that there's tons of stuff that I missed, so if there's anything that you find interesting or some trivia that I got wrong, feel free to put it in the comments. I will happily read any fan theories or any things that I may have missed. Thank you all so much for liking and subscribing. You readers are awesome. Let me know how you like my makeup look. Do I look like Nell? So I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll be doing a movie this time because wow, is doing a series strenuous for me. It's a long process, but I do it because I love y'all and because I love Mike Flanagan. So I'll see you folks in 2 weeks, and in the meantime, be queer, read books. Bye. This episode is exquisitely shot. It's shot like Adolf. Oh my god. Like Hitchcock's Rope. I'm so sorry. I know that you're editing this, Robin. I'm sorry. And I didn't bring my brushes. I am such a mess today, you guys. I'm gonna drink some more coffee. Luke more or less asks Hugh if he thinks that Nell was the bent neck lady. My god. Hugh asks, nope. Luke asks Hugh whether he thinks that Nell was the bent neck. Why can't I say bent neck lady? Hugh asks, nope. That's it. I'm done. I quit. Hugh. I look like shit. It's okay. It'll look good. It will end up looking good. I have faith. It's hard to say. Hair stuff. Where's my hair stuff?